So I want you to picture something with me. A 50-ish Kelly is sitting across from a guy who has been his mentor, capital M, official, the guy, for about 20 years. And Kelly has a real problem, not a should I take this meeting problem. It's I think I might need to leave the industry I've spent my whole career in problem. And the says, and I want you to sit with this. He says, well, in my day, we just stuck it out. In his day, this mentor is telling Kelly about his day as he fought in a war. He worked at one company for 31 years and retired with a pension and a watch. That's not a mentor for the problem Kelly had. That's a museum exhibit with really good intentions. But that was the moment, like Kelly's, that I figured out something that took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out. The one wise mentor thing, the guy who has all the answers, who you take to lunch, who tells you what to do, what model was built for a career that doesn't exist anymore. And if you're still out there looking for your one guy who's going to solve it all, I've got some news for you. It's going to sound harsh, but before it sounds helpful, you need a board, not a guy, a board. This is Live Without an Expiration Date. I'm Rich Jones. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, it's for professionals in the second half of their career, some of whom are facing layoffs, firings, restructurings, taking a gap to care for a family member in crisis or other career disruptions. So let's get into it. Segment one, why the one mentor model dies. Okay, so let's back up because I want to be fair to the one mentor model before I bury it. It's not a dumb idea. It's actually a pretty old, and pretty good idea. Somebody farther down the road than you who's willing to give you time and honesty helps you not make every mistake yourself. Great, ancient wisdom works fine. But here's where it breaks. It breaks on math, and it breaks on the shape of a modern career. The math first. When you're 27, your problems are relatively low dimensional. Should I take this job? How do I deal with this manager? Am I being paid fairly? One smart 50-year-old who's seen 127-year-olds go through this can answer almost all of that from experience. The variance is low. The playbook covers you. By the time you're 47, your problems have forked into like 6 different categories that don't have anything to do with each other. You might be dealing with how do I stay technically credible when the tools changed twice since I learned my trade? Or how do I negotiate a package when I'm the most expensive person in the room and everyone knows it? Or how do I even think about what I want the next 15 years to look like when the next 15 years might include elder care, might include a kid in college, might include a body that doesn't do what it used to do? Or how do I find a new professional identity if the title I've had for a decade goes away? One person has not lived current credible experience in all of that. I don't care how wise they are. I don't care how many lunches they'll take you to. Nobody's that person. And if you find someone who claims to be that person for you in all 6 of those fronts, I'd actually be a little suspicious. That's not wisdom. That's a hobby of taking opinions. That's a hobby of having opinions about your life. Second problem, the shape of the career itself changed. The one mentor model assumes your mentor is ahead of you on a path you're both on. Same industry, similar trajectory. They just started earlier. That works when careers are linear. Yours probably isn't anymore. Maybe you switched functions. Maybe your industry got disrupted out from under you. I talk to credit union people around about this constantly. By the way, an industry that is consolidating in real time. Maybe you went fractional or independent, or you're building something nobody in your network has ever built. If your mentor's path and your path forked 15 years ago, they're not ahead of you anymore. They're just older than you. Those are very different things. I want to say that twice because I think it's the whole episode in one sentence. Being older than you is not the same as being ahead of you. I say this as a guy who spent a solid decade of his career quietly nodding at advice from someone whose last real career decision was made during a completely different economy, in an industry that looked completely different, using a definition of loyalty that I'm pretty sure came from the company town. I didn't push back, I just nodded. The Marine Corps taught me to respect rank. It does not train you to ask, wait, is this rank actually correct for this terrain? I had to learn that part on my own more than once. So here's the reframe. And it's the whole idea of the episode. Instead of one mentor who's supposed to be right about everything, you build a small board, 3 or 4 people. Each one has a specific seat, a specific job, and this is important. You don't expect any one of them to do the other seat's jobs. That's not a personal failing of any one relationship. That's just organizational design. You wouldn't put your CFO in charge of product. Don't put your one work friend in charge of your entire psychological well being and your salary negotiation and your industry intelligence. That's a lot to ask of someone who also has their own life. Segment 2, the 4 seats. All right, 4 seats. I'm going to walk you through each one, what that seat does and what it's not for, and roughly what it looks like to find someone for it, because I know half of you are already composing the anxious LinkedIn message in your head, and I need you to put the phone down for a second. Seat 1, the industry translator. This is the person who is currently actively inside the machine, not retired from it, not once removed from it, in it right now this year. Their job is intelligence, not inspiration. Tell them they tell you what's actually happening, which departments are getting cut, which skill is suddenly currency, which reorg rumor is real and which is nonsense, what a job posting actually means versus what it says. Here's the trap with this seat. People want to be the most senior person they know. Wrong instinct. You want the most current person you know, a sharp person 2 levels below you who's still in the trenches, will often outinform a retired executive who golfs with the board. Currency beats seniority in this seat every time. I kind of learned this by doing it backwards for years. I kept going to the most senior, most decorated person in my network for the market intel and getting answers that were true in roughly 2014. Meanwhile, there was a 34-year-old on my own team who could have told me in 90 seconds that the thing I was worried about wasn't even the thing to worry about anymore. I just didn't think to ask her because she didn't have chief in her title. That's on me, not on her. Seat 2, the strategic challenger. This is your uncomfortable seat, and it should stay uncomfortable because if it gets comfortable, you've broken it. This person's entire job is to poke holes in your plan before reality does it for free. Not a cheerleader, not someone who tells you your idea is great, someone who says out loud, I don't think that works, and here's why, and doesn't flinch when you get defensive. Most people don't have this seat filled because most people, if they were honest, don't actually want it filled. They say they want honest feedback. What they usually want is honest feedback that agrees with them. The strategic challenger seat only works if you've explicitly told the person, I need you to push back on me, and then, this is the hard part, you actually let them. If every time they push back you get quiet or weird for a week, that seat closes itself fast. I've got a guy for this seat, an executive still in financial services, has known me 20 years and has never once in 20 years let me leave a conversation feeling better about a bad idea than I should. I called him about a plan once. I was going to make a move that, in hindsight, was mostly about my ego and not much about strategy. And he let me get about 90 seconds into the pitch before he said, and I quote, this sounds like something you want to be true, not something that is true. Rude? Correct. That's the seat, though. Seat three, the personal sponsor or advocate. This is the person who says your name in rooms you're not in, not the person who advises you, the person who actually vouches for you, who mentions you for the thing, who puts their own credibility on the line by recommending you. This is different from a mentor and different from a reference. A reference confirms things after the fact. A sponsor creates opportunity before the fact, using their own capital to do it. This seat is the one people neglect the longest because it requires you to accept that your work doesn't always speak entirely for itself. Someone has to be in the room saying it out loud. That's not a knock on your competence. That's just how rooms work. I had a boss that, even though he laid me off, I deeply respected. When I was being considered for a senior role, I reached out to ask if he would be a reference for me. He not only agreed to be a reference, he told me exactly what he would say to the hiring manager about who and what I was and what I would bring to the organization. That, my friend, is a personal sponsor. Seat four, the peer in the same foxhole. The last seat, and honestly the one that saves people's careers more quietly than any of the others. This is someone who is roughly your level, going through roughly your version of the same disruption right now, not ahead of you, giving wisdom from the mountaintop, beside you in the mud, dealing with the same stuff in real time. This seat does something none of the other three can do. It tells you you're not crazy and you're not alone. When you're 52 and your title got flattened in a reorg, and you're wondering if you're the only person this has ever happened to, the industry translator can't fix that feeling. The strategic challenger definitely won't try, and the sponsor's whole job is forward looking. It's the peer who says, same thing happened to me in March. That actually gets you through the week. This one This has proven over the years to be my biggest blind spot because maybe it's my Marine Corps background that teaches you to take what life deals you with bravery and endurance. Maybe it is part of my DNA to not ever show fear or distress, but put up a brave face and gut through it. Maybe it's my persistent optimism, thinking everything is going to work out, even when the evidence says, no, it isn't. If there's one lesson here that I don't want you to miss, it's don't be like Rich. It turns out I thought I was the only one dealing with this is one of the most common sentences in leadership across every industry I've ever worked in. Okay, quick gut check before we move on. 4 Cs: industry translator, strategic challenger, personal sponsor, foxhole peer. I'd bet real money that if I read those, at least two of them, you already thought of a name. You don't need to go recruit 4 strangers off LinkedIn. Most people already have 2 or 3 of these relationships sitting around informally, unnamed, and underused. The work isn't finding new people. The work is being honest about who's already there and asking them on purpose to do the job they're kind of already doing by accident. Segment 3: how do you actually ask somebody without being weird? All right. The part everyone is actually anxious about is how do you ask someone to be on your personal board without it sounding like you're proposing marriage at a coffee shop? First, don't call it a personal board of directors when you ask them. I love the framework. I use it constantly. But it says, but if you say those exact words to a real human being over coffee, you'll watch them get slightly uncomfortable in real time. Nobody wants to be informally installed onto anything. What actually works is a much smaller and much more specific ask. Here's the move: name the specific thing, not the relationship. Instead of, will you be my mentor, which is a huge, vague, lifetime ask that scares people off, try, I'm trying to figure out how the industry is actually shifting, and you're the sharpest read I know on that. Could I grab 20 minutes of you every couple of months to compare notes? That's it. That's specific. It's bounded. It's flattering without being weird. And it tells them exactly what job they're being asked to do. I want to be honest that I got this wrong for years. I used to make the big, vague ask, hey, can I pick your brain sometime? Which literally means nothing and asks for everything. I once sent a message like that to someone I hadn't talked to in 4 years and then acted surprised when he didn't respond. 4 years, no context. Can I pick your brain? I basically asked the guy to donate a kidney and called it coffee. The specific ask works because it's small, yes. Nobody has to decide to become your permanent life advisor. They just have to decide whether they can do one specific bounded thing. The most generous, competent people will say yes to a small, specific thing far more readily than a big, vague thing because the small thing doesn't feel like a trap. Second piece: you don't need all 4 seats filled by month 2. This is not a hiring sprint. Fill the seat that's most urgent right now. If you're navigating a real transition, strategic challenger and personal sponsor matter most. If you're trying to stay sharp in a stable role, industry translator and foxhole peer matter more. Build it in order of pain, not in order of the outline I just gave you. Third, tell people what seat they're in, at least to yourself, even if you never say the actual words to them. It challenges how you use the relationship. If you know someone is your strategic challenger, you stop calling them to vent and start calling them to be told you're wrong. Those are different phone calls. Most relationships get muddy and eventually fade because nobody was ever clear on what job the relationship was actually doing. Segment 4, the part nobody warns you about: maintaining 4 relationships. Okay, real talk, because I don't want to sell you a framework and then leave you to figure out the boring part alone. For relationships is a lot to maintain. And I want to be honest about the failure mode because I've lived it. The failure mode is you build the board with real intention. Everyone says yes. You feel great about yourself for about 6 weeks. Then life happens. And 18 months later, you realize you haven't talked to your sponsor since a Tuesday you can no longer specifically remember. And now reaching back out feels weird because too much silence has gone by and the whole board quietly evaporates. Here's the fix. And it's not clever, it's just disciplined. Put a floor under it, not a schedule. You have to defend to anyone, just a personal floor. Something like industry translator, quick check in every couple months, strategic challengers. Whenever there's an actual decision on the table, no set cadence, but you use them when it matters. Sponsor, at a minimum, twice a year. And this is the part people skip. Tell them what you're working on, even when you don't need anything. So the ask, when it comes, isn't a surprise. Foxhole Pier, honestly, the most casual of the four, but the most damaging one to let go quiet, because that's the one that's catching you emotionally, not just strategically. A monthly check in is probably a good floor. And here's the other half of the maintenance nobody talks about. This only works if it's not entirely one directional. I don't mean you owe these people equal time. I mean, at a minimum, be a genuinely good use of their time when you show up. Come with something specific, not a vague cloud of anxiety. Say thank you like you mean it. And when you can, be useful back. Send them the article, make the intro, be someone's foxhole peer or sponsor in return, even informally. A board where one person only ever takes doesn't stay aboard very long. It becomes an obligation with a deadline, and people quietly stop returning your calls. I'll admit it, I'm better at building these relationships than maintaining them, which is a very on brand thing for a guy who wrote an entire book about not letting things quietly expire and then let a friendship with an actual mentor go stale for 2 years because I meant to call. Physician, heal thyself, or in my case, podcast host who wrote a whole chapter on this, occasionally forgets to follow his own chapter. The actual work. So here's what I want you to do. And it's genuinely a 10-minute exercise, not a weekend project. Take a piece of paper, write the 4 Cs down: industry translator, strategic challenger, personal sponsor, foxhole peer. Next to each one, write a name if one comes to mind immediately. Don't force it. Don't overthink it. The first name that shows up is usually right. For whichever seats are empty, don't panic. Empty is just information. It tells you where the actual gap is, which is more useful than a vague feeling that I should probably network more, which I promise you is not a plan, it's a mood. Then pick the one seat that matters most to you right now, not the one that sounds impressive, the one that's actually costing you something by being empty, and send one specific bounded small ask message this week. Not, can I pick your brain? A real specific ask, 20 minutes, once a quarter. Here's exactly why I'm asking you specifically. That's it. That's the whole homework. One list, one honest look at the gaps, one specific message. The one mentor model is a failure on your part if it stopped working for you. It's just a tool that was built for an earlier, simpler shape of career. and you don't live in that career anymore. Nobody does. The people who are navigating the second half of their careers will, well, right now, almost without exception, aren't the ones who found one perfect wise person. They're the ones who quietly built a small, specific, well maintained board and had the humility to admit that no single human being, however wise, however senior, however good at buying lunch, was ever going to be enough on their own. Go on, build your board, not all at once, just the first seat. This has been Live Without an Expiration Date. I'm Rich Jones. Go be useful to somebody today and let somebody be useful back to you for once. Maybe start by sharing this episode with friends and peers that you know are struggling with a real or imagined career disruption.